We are joined today by Dr. Dee Jepsen, Associate Professor and State Agricultural Safety Leader for The Ohio State University. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. This is a great topic.
Can you just start by giving a little bit of background as to your experience and expertise with grain bin safety and farm safety issues in general?
Well, I've been working with Ohio State University now for 26 years, and grain bin safety has been one of those evolving issues. So we didn't start out saying gangbusters on this is what we need to do training on, but as we started to watch some of the fatalities and some of the injuries, as we were building more grains across the country and in Ohio specifically, it's on the eastern edge of that corn belt, and so it wasn't always a high priority for us. But now in the last 10 years, it's certainly something we want to talk about.
And can you just give people a little bit of ideas to your background and years of experience, what you specialize in?
What I specialize in, that's really interesting. I'm an animal science major, and my first job with occupational safety and health was really with a NIOSH project where we were doing farm hazard assessments, and I was one of the safety team members that went out and did farm inspections on farms. And so it was a real eye-opener, and then things just kind of evolved and moved on from there. My educational background, besides that animal science degree, I also got a master's in education, and then my PhD is in human community resource development with a minor in public health. And that has really served me well with public health, because as we start looking at health and safety of farmers and of everyone in general, it's kind of it's a niche area, but it really has served me well. And we could be sitting in engineering, we could be sitting in education or public health. And so all together, this discipline kind of taps into a lot of different backgrounds and resources.
Great. That's wonderful. So first question that we wanted to ask is, just in general, overall with your perspective, why do you think farm safety is so important?
Well, I'm asked that question from time to time, and I usually turn it right back around on the person, and so then I'll even ask the audience to be even thinking about, where was the first time you learned farm safety? Or maybe who did you learn farm safety from? And so as we start thinking about that, there's probably a person involved, somebody that you remember, whether it's a role model, a family member, a supervisor. And so then you think, well, what was their qualifications to teach me about farm safety? This discipline is really, really young. And so we have to think about, how are we training people in farm safety, and what are we training them on so that it's relevant? And certainly on-the-job training is the best way to do that, but we have to have some, basis for what are we training them on. And do we have good role models out there teaching good things, and they have accurate information, or are we learning it the same old way we've always done it? And so farm safety to me is making sure we get accurate information to the right people, and that it's making a difference. So it's not just out there preaching or giving some recommendations that really can't be implemented. Let's make some things practical and best management practices.
What do you think is the least understood aspect of farm safety?
That's a great question. I would say it's that people really have the power to make changes. They don't think they do. They think that safety is safety, and it's preventing them from enjoying something, because to be safe, then you have to follow a lot of rules and do a lot of things. But I think empowering folks to know that they can practice farm safety, it's not as hard as it sounds. It costs a little bit of money to implement some items and make some changes on our farm, but a lot of times it's our thinking, and our technology is behind some of that as well. And I just like to empower people to let them know that they have the ability to make those changes and to impact their other workforce.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm making an assumption that most people listening to this or watching this are adults, right? But is there a desired age range that you hope to reach with all of your communications and messages?
Yeah, interesting. When we're on the farm, all ages seem to be welcome, and we do encourage that. And so when you think of what age we would start training, I would say it depends on the job description. Now, a lot of times that's even a foreign topic, a job description. Don't we all just come and we all just start working? But if you had a job description that said, in order to operate this piece of equipment or in order to do this type of task, you need to be able to demonstrate certain skills. And so whatever that age is when we would want to make sure that those skills are enforced. I always joke about, should we have a yardstick up that says you have to be this high to ride the ride or to operate a piece of equipment. And so we don't want to talk about age, or we don't want to talk about the size, because sometimes our physical size doesn't always mean that we're mentally capable or emotionally ready to perform that job. And so then that's where age-appropriate tasks kind of come in. Some of our safety messages will change to don't do this. When you're real small, we don't want you to get close to equipment. We don't want you to handle things unless you're ready for it. And so then we move into let's be careful, or let's implement certain strategies that we've been trained on. So when you ask me what age, I guess that's really going to depend on the type of task it is, and what if they're operating equipment, if they're doing just maintenance and, non-moving equipment type of training. So if we could start thinking about that even on the farm, a lot of young people want to follow their role models, their grandparents or their parents, their uncles, aunts into the workplace. But if we treat that as a workplace, maybe the age would say, it's not when you become this age, it's when you understand these types of things.
Right. That's great advice. So we've been talking so far primarily about farm safety in general, but one thing I did want to zero in a little bit more closer now on is grain bin safety in particular. That's really important for us at Nationwide. We have our Grain Bin Safety Week each year. And I guess when it comes to this issue, when it comes to engulfment and entrapment, why do you think these still happen? I mean, I know it's kind of a weird question to think about, but why do you think in general that grain bin entrapments and engulfments still happen?
Because we're humans and we take risks and we push ourselves to the limit. And as much as we want to train, as much as we want to build in engineering controls, grain bin entrapments happen because we've taken a calculated risk. We feel that we could either enter a bin, or we feel that we're only going to be doing things, we tell our minds these certain, whatever we want to tell our minds. We're impatient. We don't want to wait for that second observer to be there, and we want to enter alone. We're impatient. We didn't turn off the auger. We didn't lock out the equipment. Somehow we're taking these calculated risks, and we thought that was an okay thing. So when you talk to folks after a near miss, or even after a successful extrication from a bin, they always say, boy, I wasn't thinking, or I had my mind on other things. So I think it's because we're human that these things still happen.
Right. Now, for people who are listening to this or watching this that may not be as familiar with grain bin safety issues, can you explain, just kind of set up the scenario of why someone goes into a grain bin in the first place? What's going on in that case? What are they trying to accomplish?
Oh, people enter bins for many reasons. I guess if you had $1 million and it was locked behind a door, wouldn't you want to open that door every now and then and look down and see it and touch it? And grain is not like coins, gold coins, or it's not like gravel. It really can take on different properties. And so it's how we're managing our grain. It will take on moisture content. It will mold. It will go out of condition, insect parts, and how we fumigate. There's a lot that goes on inside of that grain storage area. And so to be able to successfully manage that, the producer does need to be kind of a hands-on and be close by it. Now, does that mean inside of it? No, we have sensors that, can do some of the job for us. But people do enter the bin whenever it is making those adjustments to sensors. If we need to add a sweep auger, we need to enter the bin. Sometimes if that grain does go out of condition, it will form a crust, and it'll mold and clump, and so folks feel that they need to go in to break that up. Right now, we don't have a biological agent that can just eat that away and still be food grade, and so that would be nice if we could come up, with some sort of a solvent or a way to not have mechanical breaking up of the substance. And then there's just general repairs and maintenance, reasons that people would go into the bin. And so it's in those situations that they enter the bin that we would have then some best management practices in place.
Right. Okay. So, as you probably know, Grain Bin Safety Week is primarily an awareness campaign for both farmers and ranchers, but also for the paramedics, right, who are involved with coming to the scenes of accidents. What role do you think these types of campaigns play in helping prevent accidents?
Well, the farmers are out there every day, and so having a week dedicated just to their grain storage is kind of a great commercial. I think where it really has an impact is how it can rally and involve the community in this safety effort. And you just mentioned the fire departments. When fire departments can receive training or a new rescue tube, that's only empowering that community to get involved, and it has a trickle-down effect then for the farmer and the community. Also, if there's an FFA chapter that would come around this week and makes different campaigns, or other agribusinesses, just bringing it to our forefront and recognizing that storage systems can be dangerous. It's not just your typical farm safety week. This is specific to grain bin safety. So for those of us that have storage on our farms, then we need to be thinking about it at least once a year.
So, aside from engulfment, what other aspects of farm safety remain important to you?
When we think about the grain bin, the engulfment, that has a 50 to 60% of fatality rate when they're involved in the bin itself. But there's certainly other hazards around the bin: entanglements in the augers, falls. I mean, these are very tall structures that we're talking about. So whether they're icy ladders or stairs on the outside, not just always falling inside of the structure. And so the importance of wearing fall protection in those situations, not just or even ladder safety. We would want to make sure we're safe on the outside of the structure. Right. There's also problems with electrocution and other, kind of machine operation problems. I'd also like to bring in some of the health aspects, because as we're working around the grain bins, our hearing, we could really benefit from some of the hearing protection, because those fans and augers and just the noises, as we calculate some of that, are easily running 80 decibels. And that's where we'd want to start implementing a hearing conservation program, so that when it hits 90, that we're completely protected. And we know that the workers are in those environments for at least, sometimes 8 hours a day with no trouble at all. And so hearing protection is important, and so is our health with our lungs and our respirable. Wearing those N95 respirators would help keep out some of those smaller particles that can lodge into our lungs, the dust, some of the insect parts that we were talking about, and some of the fodder from harvest that's still in the bin. So we don't really think a lot about our health, but that's just as important as safety.
Right. So I know that Purdue University puts out data typically every year about grain bin safety and data on number of accidents and engulfments. I've looked at those numbers for the past few years, and it fluctuates year over year. But some years it goes down, some years it goes up. But one death is too many, right? So, in your opinion, is it actually possible to reduce the number of injuries and deaths with awareness campaigns?
Well, I think awareness campaigns are where we get our awareness, and if you don't know about the hazard, then learning about it is certainly the important piece. But the part that I like about the surveillance, and you mentioned Purdue, most universities, at least Ohio State University, also has a tracking system just for my state. Dr. Bill Field, he is tracking for the nation, and we do submit our numbers to his database. But if we don't have databases, we don't know where we're making a difference. And so when we start looking back, even 20 years from now, what were the problems? They were engulfments, entanglements, falls. What are the problems today? Engulfments, entanglements, falls. And so we feel like we have a long way to keep going with these safety messages, and I do think people can become empowered and take some changes, and we can learn how to manage, our grain bins are getting so much bigger than what they have been in past years. And so I always say this is not your grandfather's grain bin. These are large storage structures, and we are moving grain at a much faster rate than we ever had because of our increased productivity with our auger sizes and everything. And so we just need to continue to keep the awareness campaign helps us remember what those points are. And if you're part of an employment and you're hired for an agribusiness at maybe a commercial elevator, you get those regular safety trainings. And if you are, if you are the manager of your family operation or your small operation, maybe you don't have those opportunities for the formal training programs. So I think safety campaigns can help them remember and write down what are those top things that I need to know.
Right. So aside from awareness campaigns like what Nationwide is doing, assuming it's not realistic to think farmers won't ever enter grain bins for the reasons you mentioned, what other, I guess, specific precautionary messages would you have for farmers and messages we can emphasize to help ensure that they follow those proper procedures that you mentioned?
Well, of course, never entering a bin alone. If you're going to enter a bin, make sure you have a person who's an attendant who's watching you, and that we're always locking out and shutting down the other equipment. So you just wouldn't want to walk into something and knowing that the minute you break through a crust or the minute that you get close to that auger that it could entangle you, because you're just setting yourself up for not being wise in that manner. And then if you can wear a fall protection harness, and a lot of our new bins are being equipped with that. We have ASABE just last fall ratified a new grain bin standard for new build grain bins where there will be anchorage points where we haven't had anchorage points in the past. And so now there's 2 anchorage points, one at the rooftop and one at the entry. And that will be able to distribute the weight that's required for that fall protection harness. And so now as a safety professional, I feel really excited that we can tell you to enter a bin wearing a harness. And up until now, there was really no place to tie off on. So the newer bins will have this technology. And those that have all the older bins, there are retrofit kits available, and there's some systems that we can put into grain bins. And so I really encourage people to take a look at that and bring their grain their bin manufacturer out to take a look at their systems and how can they make them safer, because we know we can make safety part of our everyday life, and it's not just an odd thing or something that we had to do at the time that we built the bin. There's some retrofit kits out there that will fit those older bins.
So with all of your knowledge and decades of experience, what else would you recommend that we incorporate into grain bin safety? Primarily thinking of for next year.
Well, you guys are doing a great job, and I think it does make us focus on what the season is on the farm. And so when we think about storage and handling practices, and when we're cleaning out our bins of how we can reinforce those safety messages, I think this just repeating what those best practices are. And then if we've learned anything throughout the year, sometimes we do learn from time to time different practices, and we learn how to do things a little bit better. Then next year we can bring those to the forefront and talk about those. But training is very important. I can't overemphasize that enough, is that any person involved at any capacity of the farm, even if they're not inside the bin, if they're just around the bins and doing unloading, that we would train those individuals about what to expect, not just for themselves in their own workplace, but if someone does become injured, then what steps do they need to take as well for a fast rescue?
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, this has been a great campaign, and thanks for involving me.
Great. Well, thank you. Again, we've been talking with Dr. Dee Jepsen from The Ohio State University. Thank you.